Hey everyone, my name is Janelle Molony, or the Hottie Historian. I am super excited because James B. Mills is joining me to talk about a show that we have just finished, American Primeval. And I'm going to boast for a second. I watched it 1.5 times. So let me know if you have some deep questions because I'll be able to answer them better than James. But I'm excited to have James talking with me about this because James knows a thing or two about really cool movies, first off, but he's a Western historian and author and award-winning, and he also has been working with some pretty legendary publications here in the U.S., even though he's an Aussie guy. But he works with the Tombstone Epitaph, and he works with True West and a few other secret projects that are happening right now. I think he's pretty awesome, but I want him to tell you for sure who he is and what he's about. So go ahead, James.
Well, you did a pretty good job. I'm James B. Mills. I write about the history of the American West, just like Miss Hottie Historian does. My first book, Billy the Kid, El Bandido Simpático, was published back in 2022, went on to win awards. It's a shameless plug, I know. My next book, In the Days of Billy the Kid, The Lives and Times of José Chávez, Juan, Patrón, Martín Chávez, and Yginio Salazar, long title. That is coming out in May this year. It's scheduled for May 15th, 2025. And I'm a regular columnist / sometimes assistant editor at the Tombstone Epitaph, a monthly publication devoted to bringing cutting-edge American West history to everyone. We've had a tremendous last year. And I also work with True West magazine. My close friend Bob Bell published a lot of articles with them and taken on a bit of editorial duties with them recently as well.
And I asked him recently, what do you see behind the scenes? BTS. I asked him, I was like, what's your real job? Because we all kind of have real jobs. And he's like, no, this is what I do. This is literally what I do for a living. And that is incredible. I can't say that. I mean, I can, but that reduces my income level significantly. But yeah.
I get by.
Yeah. So speaking of Tombstone Epitaph, did you get to help edit my recent article that was in there about the herbs?
No, actually, I didn't. They didn't need me to help edit with that. It was pretty rock solid, and I introduced you to the editor Mark Boardman, of course, and helped set it up because I knew that you were a hottie young historian on the rise.
Yeah.
And but no, I didn't need to help edit that. They rocked it as it was.
They did a great job. They just added, fairy dust to it. It was beautiful. So I just wrote an article about Wyatt Earp as a youth because I'm not exactly a Western historian. I'm a family historian. And so I wrote a story about the peripheral people in his life and how at some point these Dutch immigrant boys totally ganged up on him at school, him and his brother, and they whooped his tush. And then his father yelled at him because he didn't stand up for himself, even though Wyatt and his brother were the ones that instigated everything. That is pure Earp parenting that helps define the boys growing up. That's very confusing to have a father like that. Anyways, we're not here to talk about that at all. I'm going to quickly backtrack because as we're having this conversation, I need y'all to understand that I am a nerd and I'm a member of Western Writers of America, Women Writing the West, Wild West History Association, Oregon California Trails Association, and I have worked with the Wyoming Historical Society for a few years, including hosting their popular interview series, Women of Wyoming, Then and Now. And I'm also a multi-award-winning author and historian myself, including this big baby, which is a literary breakthrough on the Platte River raids, which comes after the Mountain Meadows Massacre. But we have lots of hurt feelings that will be invested into those raids. So after watching American Primeval, you're like, I need more. I want more of this. Yeah. Next chapter. Platte River raids, for sure. All right, so we got all of that stuff out. We know who all our friends are. We know we're both super nerds, and we're also young and hot and fit and all those cool things. So let's get into American Primeval, and I want to know right off the bat your first impression, like after the close of episode 6, what guttural sound came out of you?
I thought it was really good, and there was a little slight groan from me at the close of episode 6. I thought the ending was a little predictable.
Oh
I'm
no.
just speaking for me personally. But as soon as Isaac saw that doll in the snow, I knew exactly what was going to happen. That he was going to go back and save him, get shot himself, and then die, and then they'd go to California. And of course, that's exactly what happened. So maybe I was just a little too hip to it, but I just thought that was a little predictable. But that's a minor complaint in what I think was a really good and incredibly gritty, grisly, gruesome, accurately gruesome Western series. And of course, I've seen a lot of comments from people. Some are outraged about the historical inaccuracies. I'm like, well, it's an artistic impression of events.
Bingo.
You don't look at a Vincent van Gogh painting to get an intricate, historically accurate portrait of what he was painting. You don't watch a series like this to get, a documented, intricate history either. I don't think there were any historical inaccuracies in it that I would call offensive. I'll put it that way.
That's so funny that you went to art, because I was thinking about Andy Warhol. He did the like Marilyn Monroe and soup cans and stuff. Yeah, and so you can look at this soup can painting and you can see elements you recognize. You see the shape of the can, you see the label, you see the flavor of the soup. And if someone said, "What is that?" you'd say, "Oh, it's a soup can." And Andy Warhol would say, "No, it's not, it's art." And I feel like this is the similar situation where we see elements of the Mountain Meadows Massacre. We see the simmering potential for the Sioux Wars to begin. We see Jim Bridger. We see Brigham Young. But no, it's not. It's art.
Artistic impression. It's pretty much the same as any. I just recently finished watching another series. This was a Mexican-made series, Pancho Villa, Centaur of the North. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal. 10 episodes. And it was probably the most historically accurate representation of a famous frontier-type figure that I've ever seen. There was clearly an incredible commitment to trying to tell the life of Villa and the Mexican Revolution with as much historical accuracy as possible. I'd say, I was supposed to say about 85%, 90% even possible. But there was still some embellishments there. There were still some things in there that, had been thrown in for the sake of the story. I'm not an authority on the Utah, on the whole Mormon Wars deal. I've read a little about it, but I wouldn't, if you want to know about Billy Bonney, Lincoln County War, New Mexico history, I'm your guy. You want to know about the life of Crazy Horse, I can help you. But with the Mormon Wars, I'm not an expert. But from what I do know, I don't think that it veered off the historical inspiration too strongly. Enough for anyone to throw a hissy fit about, which of course some are doing. But then there are some in our field that do take themselves a little too seriously. And they act like what we do is the Manhattan Project. We write about cowboys and Indians. All right, calm down.
Yeah. And most of us have real jobs like bankers and boring stuff. Yeah. I hear you. Okay, so I think without knowing any of the specifics of that event, can you still enjoy this series and have a great time? Absolutely. And it reminds me of Hell on Wheels. And I mean, throw anything out there. 1883, Yellow, like throw these things out there. Inglorious Bastards, maybe like where these films, yes, or Django. These are exciting, entertaining, invitational, and if you really liked it, you're gonna look up something more. You're gonna get involved. You're gonna ask questions. You're gonna Google, did this really happen?
Just going to say, the Young Guns films Emilio Estevez. They're not a real history lesson. There's glimmers, kind of shades of accuracy here and there. If it was not for those two films when I was 9, 10 years old, I would not be where I am now. If I hadn't watched those films, I would not have written the books I have. I would not be who I am. So,
And they had to have a
regardless
certain
of any,
entertainment value. Otherwise,
yeah,
especially as a kid or a young person, it's not going to stick.
of course, but you want, and a series like this, it made me want to learn more about the Mormons and the massacre. It made me want to order some books about it and really read up on it. So, that's something that Westerns can do and have an effect. And one thing that has amused me a little is I've seen some complaints about the violence. It's been called, which it is brutal.
You can't go 2 minutes. You go from one fight to the next. You have a 2-minute gap to come up for air. That's it.
Mm. But I think it's more the gruesomeness of it and the kind of the realism to it, like the scalping scene.
Yeah.
I'm like, what did you expect? I mean, I don't know about you, Janelle. I always thought that scalping would have been kind of gentle and nice. Like, oh, you let me know if this hurts. Like, of course it's going to be gruesome. I mean, and I think actually a scene in the series that really sold it to me, and it was in the second episode, was actually the throat slashing scene by the wagon, which was not pleasant to watch.
Well, they also die way too fast. Like there should be some choking and gurgling and all the things. They did tone that down way a lot.
They did. The violence you see in the series is tame compared to real life.
Yeah.
Just like I've always said, that controversial film, Soldier Blue, its portrayal of the Sand Creek Massacre was actually tame compared to what really happened. If they portrayed what really happened, they wouldn't have been able to show it in any cinemas.
Right.
But that scene really sold the series for me because I was sitting watching it. I was kind of thinking, oh, we're going to have here's the good Indians and they've killed the bad Indians and now they're going to save the lady. No, that's not what they were going to do at all, as we saw. And that was like a piece of historical authenticity that really sold me on the show. I was like, okay, because it's perfectly rational and reasonable to feel at times great sympathy or empathy, whatever you want to call it, for the plight of Native Americans in frontier times. Absolutely, with Sand Creek and stuff like that, Wounded Knee.
Yeah.
It's absolutely reasonable to feel that way. But let's not pretend that they were all peace-loving hippies either, because they weren't. And a lot of Native Americans could be absolutely brutal, ruthless when on the warpath. I mean, if you've read about how Comanches treated their female captives, it's stomach-turning stuff. So, and that scene is what sold me. I was like, okay, now I'm really, because they didn't go for the cliche good Indians, bad Indians, kind of like in Dances with Wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Here they were like, well, here's these Indians. They don't like these guys, but that doesn't mean they're going to treat these captives.
And there's we are the same people, which nowadays there's sort of this grab of we are all one and we are all that. No, you're not, or you were not. And even like, what is it? The woman's name?
I think the Indians got killed with Paiutes. And these ones that came along and did the throat slashing were Shoshone.
Shoshone. And the chief, the woman chief, was the mother of Red Feather. But they made it clear that Red Feather made his own choices. He is a faction or separate. And they politically are no longer, they are not the same. Don't associate us. We have no alliance. We have nothing. Even though they're actually blood. I love that because maybe they live 5 miles away from each other. We are not the same people. It's communicated, and that there's good and bad, not even as a people group, but it's good and bad within us all. And I think they did a great job of saying this is potential when we're all trying to breathe the same oxygen for anyone to explode.
Yeah. Well, the same thing kind of happened with Geronimo and the Apache. A lot of Apaches they disowned Geronimo. They didn't want anything to do with him.
Yeah,
because they felt
he's the troublemaker. We are not him.
Yeah, they felt that what Geronimo was doing was only bringing more pain and suffering to them in the long term. Whether they were right or wrong on that, I don't know. There's things about Geronimo that I appreciate. There's other things that he did that I can't appreciate. Mm-hmm. But then no historical figure was flawless. And if you go looking for someone, I can't think of any as flawless a story. But if you're looking for, say, a Mahatma Gandhi, who wasn't flawless either, but if you're looking for that kind of a clean cut, you're not going to find them on the frontier. There was very few. Bat Masterson is one who I would probably point to as being a pretty straight up guy for his time and place, but there weren't many. There
A
weren't many, and
consistent
we all,
character.
yeah,
Speaking of characters, I feel like, yes, we have Taylor Kittich and he has pretty blue eyes, but I feel like we don't have any main character that anyone can attach to. I feel like this is 100% ensemble and everyone is holding the storyline up. And I appreciated that kind of, but I also didn't like it because I didn't know who to follow. I didn't know who to like. And I don't know that I truly liked anyone. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Two Moons is the only person who I feel like
what about the boy?
I don't know. I think they went too far with the cripple thing and like a sympathy card or something. And then he never became his own person, even though Kittich takes or Isaac takes his leg braces off and kind of gives him a you can be a man, you can do this on your own thing. I think he still lives under his mom's skirts and he doesn't progress very far.
True. I liked Two Moons. I think, but that's in a sense what you're saying is true. But that was pretty much the frontier in a way. And as someone who's researched, for decades, the Lincoln County War, for example, there was nobody in that who I would describe as clean cut. There were some likable guys. There were a lot less likable guys. But basically, it was a case of rough men and rougher men. And that was pretty much the deal with a lot of frontier history. And I think that series captured that in exactly what you're saying. American Primeval kind of nobody was really flawless and nobody was the clear cut. I think Isaac, there's obviously some semblance of, the hero. To me, he was kind of the lead character, but at the same time, I can't disagree with you in saying that it was an ensemble effort. But then you see him, and he was right to do it, as we find out. But he was ready to leave that little girl abandoned, what he thought, she thought was an abandoned girl. He was ready to just leave her there and ride off. Yeah. So that he had some real hard man in him. Of course, that's what they should have done, as we found out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do question Two Moons too, because I hate this like with girls. What did you wear to make him? What did you do or say to get your tongue cut out? And I wonder if she had a lot to say. And so I wonder what that is within her that somebody tried to shut her up. Somebody tried to push her to the back. And even you see Isaac being like, go home, little girl. This is not your battle. And yet she's right there and she says, I will battle with you. I will. So that fire in her is really cool. Even though she can't tell you her story, she's going to be there. I don't know. So I guess she's not entirely clean. Her hands aren't clean either. She did something.
Well, maybe not. Maybe some jerk just cut her tongue out to be. Maybe she just stood up for herself and said something to the wrong person, and maybe So we can't really say if she necessarily did any wrong. She seemed like a bit of kind of a sweetheart to me.
Yeah. Or maybe she screamed one too many times.
Maybe.
Oh, that was what, episode 1 or 2?
That was one. Yeah, I was cheering for her in that moment.
Yeah.
As I would cheer for any woman who stabs a rapist.
Yeah. What do you think was a pivotal moment in the series?
Pivotal moment. Geez, there were quite a few. I don't think I could pick just one. In all honesty, I'm not prepared for that pivotal moment. I think there was one in every episode. I mean, I think when you get to the first episode, it's the massacre. We see as the series goes on, there's several pivotal moments where we learn more about Isaac. There's a pivotal moment. I think it would have been early episodes where we learn the lead female character, the mother. I cannot remember the character's name at this moment. It's 1:30 in the morning. Sarah, that's right. And
she's about as interesting as an oyster cracker.
Well, we find out that,
Not even a saltine, because there ain't even salt.
yeah, we found out that she shot a man, back east, and she's on the run. And so I think, and a pivotal moment for me was I found the whole, the young woman, Mormon girl, the wife being
Abish.
Abish, yeah. Her kind of dressing up like the Shoshone, that was, to me, was a little Dances with Wolves. I was cool, but a little Dances with Wolves to me. But of course, that led to that fateful scene in the last episode when her husband finally finds
don't
her.
say it, don't say it, don't say it.
I won't. But I'm just saying.
Horrible. It's disgusting. I hated that. Oh.
It was pivotal. It was pivotal.
I do agree. I particularly like her storyline, and I like how I would say a pivotal moment is when she realizes she's a pawn and she's being played by both sides, and now she's enemy number one or whatever. And she at some point says, I'm not going to be part of this family anymore. These family of whites, Mormons, whatever, that it's kind of layers of culture. And she says, I'm going to choose my own way. And that's when she says, I'm going to choose the people that respect me, who protect me, who've been 100% with me from the very beginning. And she takes full ownership of her decisions and who she decides to align herself with.
I wouldn't say they were 100% from the beginning. They did have it tied to a tree. I mean, she was a captive first.
They never tried to be anything but what they were. And their intentions were absolutely, I mean, they're transparent. Like, you do something wrong, we're going to kill you. You're not going to get away. You are a slave. This is how it is. But she found her family. She found people that she could actually be honest with and just be herself.
That did happen. That did happen in front of your times. There were white people who did end up in those situations and end up asking, it happened. So that there is an element of accuracy to that. And with, I think, like her decision to go to back to the Shoshone, it was one of, I think, that with everything that was going on between the Mormons and the Caribbean, it was kind of like, a traitor is worse than a friend, worse than an enemy, because an enemy never pretended to be your friend. So I think that was kind of the deal with Abish. And I liked her. I liked her character. I like Two Moons. I think Two Moons is kind of cute as well. Yeah. So
I did think that maybe they were going to allude to some kind of romance with her and Red Feather, and it never happened.
I was hoping that would happen. That would have been so cliche.
Yeah, right. That. Yeah,
and I don't like cliches. That would have pissed me off. That would have. Sorry, I shouldn't swear in front of a lady. I'm trying my best not to. That would have made me very cranky if they had done that, because that was actually something that really put me off 1883. And I was loving that series, the first 5 episodes in. I thought, this is great. Until they got to the whole Comanche romance storyline. I'm sorry, but a white Southern father in those days would have shot a Comanche man for coming within 200 yards of his daughter. And also when she says to her parents, I'm 18 now, I can do what I want. That line works today. It ain't going to work back in 1883.
Oh, no, you're still property.
That series really lost me with that, because that was I think Taylor Sheridan must have just got bored or something. I don't know. But I thought he went off the rails with that little part. So I was very glad that there was no romance between Red Feather and Abish. That would have spoiled a lot of it.
I think it would have diminished her story arc too. Like, she is a strong woman and she doesn't want to be owned by anyone. And that was an opportunity for her, if she could have, I don't know if she had a say in it, to remain unattached, because she didn't want that anymore. I think that was important. Okay, so I want to go back for a minute before I ask you these other questions and offer some history lessons. We're going to get homeschooled for a minute, y'all. I have spent 10 years being a homeschool mom, and which allows me to dive real deep and be able to explain difficult subjects in a colorful, creative, and appropriate way to young children. But in this process, I've also met descendants of people who escaped the Mountain Meadows massacre and made friends with them. And I have copies of their family research. And so there's some really cool details about that massacre that I wish were part of the episode. But then again, we're trying to tell 10,000 stories all at once. And so you just can't. But I think it's worth knowing. So in the battle, before the battle, we have to understand why this particular wagon train outfit conglomerate was being prejudiced or oppressed. It's because there was this group that joined along from Missouri, and they called themselves the Missouri Wildcats. They called themselves that, okay? And then these guys would talk loudly about these Mormons and how they were part of the original group that chased the Mormons out of their homes naked and cold in the middle of the night in Missouri and got them to leave their state. And they are the exterminators of Mormons. One person says, oh yeah, my family has the gun that actually shot Joseph Smith. And they are these people. And they're talking about it as they're coming through Utah. P.S. Fort Bridger was not in Wyoming. No, it was not. It was in Utah territory. That is easy. You can Wikipedia that. And they missed that. Okay. I don't have a lot of bones to pick. It's art. But that's easy. So they're coming through Utah. And so they cause problems because the Mormons are like, we don't want to do business with you because you're a bad customer. You're rude. So somebody along the way, maybe Brigham, maybe just the militia, maybe just actual residents there who are like, I don't like you people, decided to boycott the Missouri Wildcats, but by default, the entire wagon train. So after leaving Salt Lake, every single stop they came along, all of the residents closed shop, put fences up. You can't come in, you can't trade, you can't buy, you can't camp. And so they're being depleted of resources and becoming desperate because of those people. So at some point, 20 miles before the event, they meet this guy, Jacob Hamblin, who's one of the original settlers in the 50s. And Jacob Hamblin is the owner of Mountain Meadows. It's on his personal property. His house is 4 miles outside of the thing there. Anyways, so they meet Jacob Hamblin. Jacob Hamblin is a pretty decent dude, and he's missing from this TV show. He should have been there. Jacob Hamblin is like, yo, you can stay on my property at Mountain Meadows. There's tons of room, lots of grass, water, all the provisions. So he invites them there. Then he's gone on business. All of this stuff happens. He comes back after the event and he sees all the dead bodies. And they, the people who clean up the scene, take all the little children under 6 and give them to him and his wife to be like foster parents. It's super weird. And I wish I could have seen his perspective of like, I know what just happened. I have all these babies to keep, 17 babies to now raise. And I'm not supposed to say a thing to anybody about what I know. Right? So I wish his story was there. Also, the battle is 5 days long, or 4 days and 5th day surrender. And in that fight, they lower the wagon boxes. This is stuff, I love this. We don't know about this stuff. So they take the wheels off. They lower the wagon boxes in that corral. They fill sand in the wagon boxes. So now bullets and arrows and whatever is not getting through. And because they dug, they now have trenches. The women and children can get down in the trenches and they fight and they hold off the Mormon militia for 5 days until they run out of water to drink. So this is not an episode. This is not 20 minutes. This is 5 days of constant live fire that the Baker Francher party held off. Like, that's impressive. So these are like little tiny details that if people say, I want to know what really happened and I want to know, like, is this true? When you start to look into the details, it's so much better. Like the true story, yes, it's more violent, but it's more powerful. It's more impactful. It's so much better. Oh my gosh. So I could go on about the Poteet family, but if you don't know, the Poteet family escaped the Mountain Meadows massacre. So people say there were no survivors. Well, I mean, besides the 17 children, there was the Poteet family. And that's another perspective. I can imagine that be a character in this show of the one family that sees a Mormon being mistreated by the Missouri Wildcats. And the Poteet family restored that Mormon and made it right. And they made amends. And that one Mormon said, "Psst, in the morning, don't go to Mountain Meadows. Go left to Arizona. Don't look back. Put your tailgate down on your wagon. You can take anyone you want with you, but do not look back." And he saved their lives. And I feel like, again, that fits in that element of good and bad is within us all. And that simple act of kindness saved their lives. So where was that? I mean, there's stories like that.
Yeah,
My
it's
gosh.
the same. It's the same with every series. I mean, I could say, you're saying it lasted 5 days. It reminds me of like in the first Young Guns film where you have the siege in Lincoln that just lasts overnight. One night. That actually it lasted 5 days. It went on, dragged on for a long time. That's always the case, and a lot of those characters. But these are things that you're discussing that anyone who watches the show out there, if they're really intrigued, can research and look up. And as you said, I agree with you. The real history is more often than not even more entertaining than any artistic impression that we see in a film or a series. So
Sometimes even more unbelievable.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's almost like I said. Anyone complaining about the violence in this series, in reality, the violence is far more grotesque, and that they wouldn't be able to portray events as they really were,
Yeah.
or it wouldn't. I don't think the show would air. So,
What do you think American Primeval's impact on the Western genre is?
well, I think it's too early to tell that definitively. I will say it's now at last count, which I think was nearly 2 days ago. It's at 24.7 million views on Netflix. It's a global smash. At the moment, it's everywhere. Headlines, every magazine's covering it. It's everywhere. It's on social media. You can barely scroll through Facebook 5 minutes without seeing something
Hollywood
about it.
Reporter has a really good interview. I
There's been a lot.
particularly like that one.
There's been a lot. So at the moment, it's kind of it's going beyond a popular Western miniseries and it's becoming a pop culture phenomenon right now. In terms of its overall impact, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think I'm just ecstatic that a Western series is having this kind of massive success and causing such, chaos. I think it's great for the genre in itself. So, and I've kind of discussed this with a long time, my best friend, actually, of over 20 years. He's not a historian or a writer, but he's a Western history enthusiast. He reads about it. He's a Western film maniac, and he's a very harsh critic. Very harsh, more harsh than I am. And he really liked this series. And he said to me, it might not be, it's not as good as Lonesome Dove, but it's still pretty good. And there is, I think, some degree of parallel between not necessarily the series themselves, but when Lonesome Dove came out in 1989, that was a huge, millions and millions watched. It was a huge event. But what's happening with American Primeval right now, the hysteria, it's everywhere. I think there's a little parallel there. It is, you could say in a way, it's our generation's Lonesome Dove. And from what I've seen, there's some negativity towards it. One friend of mine said that it was so bad it made Horizon look like a masterpiece. I think that's just me. I think he's just been a little harsh. Hey, that's just like, your opinion, man.
Yeah.
But for the most part, from what I've seen and posts that I've put up on the Epitaph page, which get a lot of traffic on the Tombstone Epitaph Facebook page, the majority of feedback is very positive. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are saying what I've said, that they really like the series because it's so gritty
Yeah.
and so grisly. A lot of friends of mine, Sam Dolan, said that, and it's rocking on very strongly at the moment. I'm not sure. I know Bob Boswell. He watched 4 episodes. I'm presuming he's watched them all by now. I don't actually have his definitive take on the series yet. I have to ask him now. What do you really think? But yeah, I think I know my editor at the Epitaph, Mark Gordon, and he really liked it, and so I just think it's great for the genre overall.
Yeah.
And there's so many more Western stories. I would love to see a series like this about the flight of the Nez Perce.
Oh, cool.
And Chief Joseph. That would be incredible.
But like same level, maybe not necessarily the same director, but same level.
Yeah. Not the Billy the Kid series, which is atrocious, not just historically, but to me, it's just bad television. And I thought the Bass Reeves series was hugely disappointing. I mean, you took one of the greatest lawmen in frontier history, and the show
could have been
didn't
more. Yeah,
the show really didn't do him justice at all. But as I said, the Pancho Villa, Centaur in the North series, a Mexican-made series, the Mexican showed us how it was done with that. And this series, I think, as well, it's going in the right direction. There's so many other histories that could be examined and could be that would make tremendous series like this. Like I just mentioned, the Nez Perce, that would be one. I think an Apache Wars series would be great like this. There's so many.
One thing I think that this show does very well to impact the genre is to combine very clearly the Indian Wars, Indian conflict with the Gold Rush and Manifest Destiny and Civil War, and just put them into a super bomb. And I like that particularly because stories of the West or the Wild West are not just a man, a horse, and a gun. Like the Civil War is the West. This is all about getting out of the war, pushing West and control and dominion and politics and all that. And it's all jam-packed in there. So I feel like those subjects can sometimes be peripheral. And I would argue, no, they're not. They're integral. So if you had to give American Primeval a star rating 1 to 5, where would you land?
I would land at 4.5.
So you cut
4.5.
half a star. Half a star. That seems petty, but what is that thing that's under your skin? Why?
Well, as I said, that the ending for me was just a little predictable, and I found the whole Abish joining the Shoshone a little Dances with Wolves felt a little tacked on. Thankfully, there wasn't a romance with Redfeather. But I guess those little things are probably what would keep it from a 5-star. But 4.5 stars out of 5 is pretty good.
That's pretty high. And your complaints, I think, are very, very minor. Yeah. I think I actually might land at a 4. I might scoop right underneath you because
you're going on at me because I got 4.5 and you're going to get 4.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. And so I had to constantly remind myself, like, this is just TV. Like, this is, okay, Janelle, relax.
The American frontier was uncomfortable. But very uncomfortable. So
it's going to, as much as I respect the violence and the letting a lot of it be fully seen, I think it does create a barrier for certain demographics and for women. Women don't generally watch things that are that gory. Women have a hard time reading. Well, hey, people took their shirts off in that one. Taylor Kiddish did not take his shirt off.
A pregnant woman got stabbed in multiple times in the stomach. I did see that. Now, I've never actually watched the full series Game of Thrones.
And how many attractive men and attractive women? I mean, where was the eye candy? Peter Berg, where was the eye candy? Maybe Hinckley, maybe Redfeather, a little bit.
Two moons. Two
Hmm?
moons. And I think the young actress that played Abish is pretty good. So, and I admired her strength.
Potential.
A
But
big
it's
grown
like
women.
if you're gonna have Chris Evans or Chris, there's another Chris I like, but I can't remember his name. If you're gonna put them in a film, there's one requirement. Ryan Gosling, you have to take your shirt off. Chris Evans, you have to turn around.
Taylor Kitsch took his shirt off. First episode.
Oh no, it lifted up and it was all scarred and bloody. That is not the same. That is not. That is more of the factor versus the ooh factor. I mean, it's a
In,
thing.
in terms of, I do get what you mean. In terms of that typical eye candy, there's not much of it in Primeval
Yeah.
for a female viewer like yourself. You're not going to get a Chris Hemsworth
Like
flexing his
Hell
biceps.
on Wheels. I forget his name, Anson or Ansem. I don't know his name. Holy moly. He didn't even have to take his shirt off because we could see through every outline. That was eye candy galore. I don't care what he did to anybody along the way. I wanted to be his ninth wife.
Your husband might have something to say about
It's just a movie. But he could, I do understand he can't keep a wife for more than 5 days. So there was that, occupational hazard to be his lady. Can we
it.
talk about Hell on Wheels? I mean, maybe in another time, but like, I don't think it got enough attention. And I think we need to revisit it all the way up until maybe the last 10 episodes and then just turn it off. Don't even finish.
Can I confess?
Yeah.
I've actually never seen it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's good. And the first episode, it has that Taylor Sheridan, Peter Burr. It's like, okay, we're building up and then everybody dies. And now we get to begin the show. It's going to do that again. And it's good until Common goes crazy. And when Common goes crazy, you can just turn it off.
I have no idea what you're talking about because I haven't seen it. I mean, for me personally, the frontier, for me, that was its end was a gradual process.
Yep.
In the early 20th century, as the automobile usurped the horse as the leading mode of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
That, for me, others may disagree. They may say, well, it's barbed wire in the 1890s, and when it really started to get used. And they would have a point too. And other people would say that there were elements of the Wild West that continued right up to the Second World War. So, I mean, there's elements of, even today, I guess. I mean, Hell or High Water, that has all the elements of a classic Western, but it takes place nowadays. So, and there was some eye candy in that for you, I think.
It was good and it was uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable.
Hell or High Water is a rare film where I actually found myself cheering for one of the bank robbers, but also cheering for the lawman chasing him down. I wanted both those guys to win, but I knew that wasn't possible. And I loved the ending because neither of them won and neither of them lost. So
yeah, I feel like that's also how American Primeval ended, is that nobody won anything.
yeah. There's been talk of another season. I've seen that.
I saw that, a prequel, but also I read a quote from Taylor Kittich, and he was like, I just want to film a rom-com and chillax for a minute. And I
Fair
can,
call.
yeah, because he's done like nothing but deep, dark, gritty, rough stuff. And not that I don't know if I believe him in a rom-com. You'd have to.
You'd have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, you can zhuzh it out a little bit. I don't know that he can truly be funny, but he's got pretty eyes, so maybe. All right, so if you guys have enjoyed watching this response, I would say back chat or something. But no, it wasn't all negative, and it's not all. I mean, it's gossip, but we aren't just messing around for funsies. We do have a real pure passion for what we're talking about and the genre, and even a deep respect for the historical events, the true events that happen We've done our research. This is not a flippant conversation. The Mountain Meadows massacre was horrific.
Horrific.
And it's worth, if you're curious, even if you're not that curious and you're feeling kind of jaded, you need to Google it. You need to look it up. You need to get a book. You need to know about it. And if this is your first introduction to it, it's not enough. It's not enough. You need to know more.
Can I ask you a quick question, Janelle?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask you. You've said you like. I presume you know some Mormons. I don't. I know people of various religious dominions, and I know some fellow atheists like myself. But I presume, like, if you know some Mormons,
Yeah.
what's their take of the series? Well, how do they feel? Were they offended by it? Were they like, well, that's what happened? What was their take?
It depends on who you ask. Nowadays, it's just a thing that those people did back then. It's kind of like I have Germans in my ancestry, and people are like, so what do you think about the Holocaust? I'm like, that was a long time ago, and those people are dead, and
Yeah,
I have nothing to do with them.
yeah.
Um,
There comes a point where I think there's a cutoff there. No Mormon alive today should feel any personal guilt for the Meadows massacre. You're talking
yeah.
hundreds of years.
There's stories from the children that were taken in by Jacob Hamblin and his wives, Rebecca and Priscilla, at that time. And they only stayed with them max 2 years. A lot of them were put in other local homes because 17 kids is too much. So, but they were all kind of still together. And their memories are confused with the Hamblins because they fell in love with them. And some of them believed that Jacob and the two wives were their actual mom and dad. And they felt so much love, so much care. They had some kind of reunion with the grandchildren level where the grandchildren got together and the grandchildren of the survivors said, you need to know we are grateful to the Hamblins. We thank you. They took care of us. They told us what love is. They gave us a mother's care. They gave us a long-term steady home. And then the government sent them back to Arkansas to like find their redneck families. But there is something to that as well as, I mean, I know that Jacob kept a secret and the pressure on him would have been immense to do that. But even in that situation, and I feel like this runs parallels with World War II with the doctor that put the babies in her bag, or the repairman who put them in their wagon, getting the babies out. I feel like there's parallels here where even under this horrible situation, he did what was best for those babies, and he kept them immune or healed them from the effects of whatever they did witness.
Here's a classic example of what the kind of dichotomy of right and wrong. I assume you've heard of Hermann Goering, right?
Not ringing a bell right now.
Well, anyway, he was one of the top Nazis. He was one of Hitler's right-hand men. He was like major military figure in Nazis and World War II. But he had a brother named Albert.
Mm-hmm.
And his brother, Albert, hated the Nazis. He hated them. And he rescued so many Jews. He was like Oscar Schindler. And he said years later, after the war, he said that his brother, who was a devout Nazi and was against the Jews, his brother told him, he said, if you want to rescue these people, can you please do it quietly because you are causing me a lot of irritation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, Hermann Goering was not a good man, but even there's a glimmer of humanity there to some degree. Not to say that Hermann Goering didn't deserve everything he got, because he did. He deserved to be tried at Nuremberg and hanged. But that's kind of like, even with like situations like that with families, you have one brother who's one of the top Nazi guys, and you have his brother Albert, who was like Oscar Schindler, who was rescuing Jews and saving them and helping them, smuggling them out of it. And it's just, human circumstance can be so extraordinary in that sense. And just what you were talking about, what I'm saying is irrelevant, really, but what you were talking about just kind of made me think of that in a way. That's Jacob, kept that secret, and but at the same time, I mean, what could he tell the kids?
Yeah. And he's an insider. His life is at stake. His wife's at stake. His family's at stake. All these children. What's the best and the worst outcome? You have to think the best outcome is stay quiet and give these children life. That's the best, most humane, most loving, kind thing he could do until the coast was clear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a fair call. I mean, yeah, I think, yeah, he did the best he could under the circumstances, what he thought was right. And and this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's in regard to this series, and it's in regard to all history that we're freakish about. People often get offended by a series like this, or a lot of things, the brutality stuff and situations, the language that was used in those times compared to, it's not acceptable today. History, and I mean all history, does not care about our modern day sensitivities.
It doesn't care if it offends you. It happened.
It doesn't. Nobody who was alive in the 1850s nobody who was alive in the 1850s, no matter who they were or what they were doing, they did not care what someone would think about what they were doing 150 years later. Just like Janelle, how many times in your life have you stopped and think, you know what, I wonder what someone will think about me doing this 150 years from now?
No way. And obviously they're not thinking, hey, in 150 years, people are recording and they're going to find this letter that I thought I threw away or left in a box, and they're going to use it as evidence against me for this one thing. Nobody thought, like Wyatt Earp. I don't think he thought when he was talking to Stuart Lake or whatever, I don't think he ever thought one day someone's going to be able to fact check this information. No one thought these things. No one thought. And now we have to be careful what we post on Facebook because they'll screenshot it.
And people act like getting offended by something is the worst thing that can happen to them. Like, I'm offended by that. Well, what, your life's over? Go tell that to some starving kid in Burkina Faso, right? Okay? You're offended by what you saw on TV. Give me a break. And, well, I mean, if you're offended, move your thumb.
True. I think there's a healthy dose of offense that needs to happen, though, when we're talking about events of this caliber. And if we prettify it, it's a disservice. People need to know what really happened. People need to know. Actually, when I was releasing Immigrant Tales of the Platte River Raids, there was a group that was not going to allow it to be promoted, seen, or whatever, housed under their roof because it was too violent and a child dies. And I was like, this is
history.
It's actually less violent than fiction. Truthfully, 8 people die. 8 people. That's it. 8 people die. It's not like
it's history.
One just happens to be a child. But they were like, this is too much. And so I thought, like, are you kidding? This is real. These are facts. This isn't, I didn't invent this to make it, it's just facts.
So if you write a book, about the Holocaust or the rape of Nanjing, like, should that be banned because it's got people getting slaughtered? It happened. It's not always pleasant to read about. And it's kind of, people get historiography at its very best is dispassionate.
Yes.
And a lot of people, even some historians, do get too emotionally involved. When I brought out, Billy the Kid, El Bandido Simpático, my very lengthy biography of Billy Bonney, that's my second plug. I thought I'd match you.
Yeah, no, it's good.
But when I brought that out, the book tends to shift a lot of the focus on the Hispano perspective of Billy Bonney. The Hispanos of southeastern Nuevo Mexico, they adored Billy. They considered him a hero. He was a folk hero to them because he was killing bad gringos. That's how they saw it.
Yeah.
Now, that is what it was. That was the situation. And I had some people saying, you can't say he was a hero. I'm like, I'm not saying he was a hero. That's what they said.
Right.
Nobody said you have to agree with them.
Nobody wants to know James's opinion on this. They want to know about BTK.
And here's Please don't call him that. That's Dennis Rader.
But truly, historian,
But
get out of the way and let me see the person you're writing about.
it is not our job it is our job to give the reader information, not to pompously lecture them on how we think they should feel about the information.
Bingo. Mm-hmm.
And personally, I have my own kind of views of Billy Bonney. I think he was certainly wasn't flawless. He was no saint. He was also, in a way, I think, a good-hearted kid in some ways, but was also impulsive, and he was violent, but young man of his times.
Yeah.
But anyone who reads my book or this next book that's coming in the days of Billy the Kid, coming out in May, and they can read what they want about things José Chávez did. It's up to them to decide how to feel about it all. Personally, anyone who reads my biography of Billy Bonney, if they want to feel that Billy was a rebellious hero, or they want to feel that he was just a thief and a murderer, personally, I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. Just decide for yourself. I'm not going to be bothered. Both views, fine. That's up to you.
You made that clear, and I don't know if it was chapter 1 or the introduction or something, but you made it clear up front, like, this is what I found when I studied it.
Was what it was.
Like, and that's it.
As I wrote in the it's actually one of my favorite lines from my own book. As I wrote in the conclusion chapter, one would be ill-advised to examine the life of any famous gun-toting frontier figure from Wild Bill Hickok to Wyatt Earp while expecting a moral treatise. As I said before, you're not going to find many clean-cut, wholesomely, perfect people. Any man who carried a gun in frontier times had some degree of roughness.
Yeah.
Some of them are just a lot rougher than others.
So since we can't get away from Wyatt, which I've tried to do, I feel like when I study my family history, and Sarah and James Rousseau, who were friends, neighbors of the Earps for 20 years in Iowa, I remember telling my Uncle Nick, I was like, I don't want to talk about the Earps. I don't want to be part of this. And I realized I can't not. But anyways, on that topic, we can actually bring them into the realm of Mountain Meadows Massacre, because in their journey, they stop at Mountain Meadows. I don't know if they ever meet the Hamblins, but they would have been there. And in Sarah Rousseau's diary, she writes about it. And I found this, I think this also would have been like a great, maybe a cut scene at the end. But she writes about going there because there's a little drama afterwards. So after the event, 2 years after, the Union or the Dragoons set up this Karen rock pile monument. And it says, like, okay, here's 120 people were massacred, 17 kids lived, it was horrible, blah, blah, blah. And the Mormons are responsible. It's very brief. But they come through. So Wyatt Earp's dad was the wagon master temporarily, but in Utah, he got demoted, which is a whole thing in of itself. And then his buddy, Richard Henry Hatton, who was in the Mexican-American War with him, becomes the new leader. And then they are also being guided by Chief Frank of Simonsville and Chief Tootsie Gavitz of the Santa Clara Band through this area. That's a lot. I mean, these are like legendary people. But she writes from being there, Friday, November 4, 1864, she said, went from Pinto to Mountain Meadows, where we camped. There we saw a monument erected to the memory of the dead, and it made me awful sick at heart to look at it and think of the suffering of the poor immigrants, which was cruelly massacred at this place, Mountain Meadows. This train of immigrants, a mixed one, some from Michigan, some from where she's from, so she probably pointed that out, some from Indiana, some from other states, arrived here in September 57, where they were murdered in cold blood by the Mormons. So even in 64, we all know, everyone knows. There was a monument raised to their memory once before, but the Mormons tore it down. And then this spring, May of 1864, sometime in May, some soldiers came through from California and they erected this other monument and dared any of the Mormons to touch it. So 2 years after, there was an investigation. They put up a monument. I mean, even like, okay, if you want to continue to pretend you're not involved, Brigham, I mean, a monument to the deceased it's no skin off your back. You didn't even build it. Respecting the dead is leave it there, but they tore it down, I think,
This
because
is Brigham Young you're talking
well, it just flat out blamed them for everything. So I think they
about.
really that was the tear down response. But I don't think people know that the monument was erected and torn down, and then the Union was like, "Do it again, see what happens."
Mess around and find out.
Right? Oh my gosh, James, it's been amazing talking to you. Actually, people don't know this. This is the first time he and I have ever spoken to each other.
In person.
For real, yeah. And it has been such a great time getting to know you and becoming your friend and your colleague. And I appreciate how you welcome younger folks into this genre with big open arms. And I hope that people will check out your books about Billy the Kid, William Boney, or whatever else you want to call him, but not BTK. And
Thank you.
check out the Tombstone Epitaph. Check out True West. These are fabulous publications, and we do want them to continue for a long, long time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. It's been awesome.